Hey everybody, today we're going to start with what is known as NATO, which stands for North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So that's pretty much all of the North Atlantic plus Canada and the United States, which you cannot see on the map. They all joined together in this alliance system, this mutual defense agreement, and this is an open treaty. There's no secret alliances like in World War One. It's very open. Everybody knows, just like in World War II, people made these alliances. Everybody knew who was on what side. So there's no secret. You do see one country right here, that's Albania. They kind of lean towards the Warsaw Pact at one point in time, which is the red over here. And that's pretty much the Soviet Union controlled alliance system. Now you see the countries here, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria. Those countries are pretty much forced to join this because the Soviet Union controls them with that iron fist. You have some countries that are white. They're basically saying, we don't want any part of this. So those are kind of open for business. Now, the key thing you need to know here, let's say that poor old France, let's say they get attacked, or West Germany over here gets invaded. Well, now all the blue comes to their defense. And in response, if, let's say, East Germany is invaded, all these areas that are in the red right here come to their defense. This was pretty much a means of trying to deter war. As I said, the Soviet Union is going to be known as the Warsaw Pact. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization that we still have today is known as NATO. The Warsaw is no longer around because the Soviet Union eventually dissolves. These countries, they may look different in today as far as their size and what's around, but they are independent countries from the Warsaw Pact. So we got our first question for today. NATO and the Warsaw Pacts were examples of A. Military aggression to try to avoid war. Well, we just said that this was trying to avoid war, trying to make sure that you knew that if you invaded or tried to take over an area, that you were going to be held responsible by all these other countries. So we can automatically, knowing all that information, just flip it, go right to D, and know that military alliances are made for some collective security. So let's talk about the United States Army. And this is also going to deal with some of the assignment that you're going to get today. It's just a short primary document from our guy right here, Harry Truman, and how he addresses the civil rights movement. Because him, FDR, and the following presidents are going to make a big deal about this. And this was a huge deal going forward about the civil rights movement because we looked at the Holocaust and we just said, you know what? How far is America from becoming like that? So one of the first things that he does eventually in time is he's going to desegregate the armed forces. And it just makes sense. I mean, look, if you're on the battlefield, you're willing to die with each other, why can't you live with each other? Why do we need barracks that are just white and black? I mean, we live in a time period where we don't have to deal with that. And that's a good thing. That's going to be a key idea going forward in the civil rights movement. And you're going to have certain people, when we get there, we're going to talk about Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier in baseball. And then you're going to eventually lead up to ideas of Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, so on and so forth. Now, one thing that a lot of Americans were really kind of worried about, the GI Bill. They were worried, okay, is this GI Bill going to be around after the war's over? Well, Harry Truman makes sure that it stays around, and it's still around today. Provides money for college, job training, trying to actually get you some loans. A lot of important companies were made out of the GI Bill. And we can also see that, you know what, if you're down on your luck, you can always go get unemployment. Now, I think our GI Bill probably should support our veterans a little bit better today, but that's an argument for a different time. Now, you see here in the picture Harry Truman. He's holding this newspaper, and it says Dewey defeats Truman. And that's because in the 1948 election, people were just like, you know what? Truman's got no chance. He really didn't think he was qualified for the job, but it was his job. He got the job because he kind of got into a backdoor deal that allowed him to become the vice president, and everybody was fine with that. FDR winds up dying. They're like, well, Truman doesn't have what it takes to lead the country. And so the Chicago Daily Tribune went around and polled people. But as we know with polls are only as effective as you make them. If you just poll one area, and that's what they did, they just polled a heavily Republican area and asked who's going to win. Well, everybody's going to say Dewey's going to win because he's a Republican candidate. So that next morning, well, actually, election day, you see the Chicago Daily Tribune. They print thousands of these newspapers. Newspaper owner wakes up, says, go out there and collect every single newspaper you can find. Get that trash off the street. I kind of think of it as when Time, back in our last election, said that Hillary Clinton was going to win the election. Well, they didn't poll correctly. The polls didn't match up. A lot of people didn't say anything. They showed up, they voted, and we got what we got. Now, the last thing the United States is going through at this point in time is the baby boom. This is a tremendous rise in the birth rate. It'll last until about 1965. Well, if you know anything, during the 30s and in part of the early 40s, people were going through the Great Depression. And people are really desperate, don't have money, it's hard to find work. They ask themselves, do we want to have kids? Because if you have a kid, it's a huge financial burden. It's one of the greatest things ever, speaking from a personal standpoint. But it really stretches your dollar. And people didn't have a lot of dollars back then. And so they were like, let's not have kids. Let's wait. Let's hold off. If you go look at the birth rates probably in the years of, let's say, 2009, 2010, you'll probably see the birth rates in America decrease when we had that recession. Well, these soldiers come home. They've got good jobs. They're making money. They say, hey, let's have a bunch of kids. Matter of fact, the birth rate was a child was born in America every 7 seconds. I mean, that's pretty crazy considering that they had pretty much a third of the population in which we have today. Going back to the Great Depression, when we're talking about how many kids were being born then, only 64% of people who are able to have kids were having kids. That's a huge rise. So let's talk about 1949. In 1949, as I was talking about during the Berlin airlift, was a year in which the Soviets backed off. They were like, let's not try to push the Americans. We're real close to getting a couple things. First key thing they were really close to, as you can see, that September, they successfully detonated a bomb. I want to say where my mouse is, right in this area. They blew one up. And the only way we found out is because we had planes flying over the Soviet Union. And they had radiation detectors on them. And all of a sudden, when our planes is going over, and they find out that this area, somewhere in here, there was a high amount of radiation. So they put two and two together, and like, crap, they got a bomb. Now, our scientists here in America were like, That can't be right. They were predicting that the Soviet Union would be probably 8 years out of maybe getting the bomb. Well, they jumped the curb. They got ahead, and that was because the Soviet Union successfully used communist members here in America to spy on the Manhattan Project, other things, and we're going to be talking about that later on, to get the information in which to get the bomb. The other thing that the Soviet Union was banking on was that China had been fighting in a civil war well before World War II. You had the People's Republic of China, as you can see right here, fighting against the Communist Party. The Communist Party is going to be led by Mao Zedong. And you got your other party, the People's Republic of China, fighting against the Communist Party. And it's going to be led by Jiang Xing. This guy has several different names. We're just going to stick with this one for all purposes going forward. And all of a sudden, Japanese invade, and they make a treaty. Like, look, Japanese are going to erase us all unless we join together. And so, for the entirety of World War II going forward, two parties fight against the Japanese. Well, the war ends, Japanese are out, and all of a sudden, Mao Zedong's like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and take this over. And by 1949, he does. And this was pretty much a bad year for the United States, for Harry Truman, and also for the Democratic Party. So that leads us to our next question. What happened on September 2nd, 1949 that caused a sudden change in U.S.-Soviet relations? And we're going to go ahead and go to C. They got an atomic weapon. That was a game changer. We no longer had a monopoly on the atomic weapon. And because of that, if we launch one on them, they can launch one on us. Now, like I said, this entire Cold War is nothing more than a form of containment. So we look at this question. In China's Civil War, the United States are going to back. Well, we can go ahead and mark out this one and this one. A and B are gone because there's no way in the world containment is going to back any type of form of communism. So we got two choices here. We got the nationalist and the nationalist. That sounds like good choices, but we got to look at the leaders. Mao Zedong, well, he's a communist, so not going to back him. Got to be D. That's your best answer. That's I'm gonna cut it a little short today, not too much short. What I need you to do is work on that primary source document. It's only 2 questions. Continue to work on the assignments I've uploaded. A lot of you have been doing a great job. I commend you on that. I'm proud of you. I love you. And I miss you. It gets really boring sitting here talking to a screen, talking about notes. You guys think I like this when I'm in class? I do. Because, I can get a conversation going. Can't necessarily get it going here. If you have any questions, please send me a message through Schoology, through email, whatever. If you need any help, let me know. I'm here for you. I love you. And I cannot stress that enough. Stay safe and be good.